Light rain. And then as we move through the day, plenty of sunshine. 1 or 2 showers possible, particularly across the east and southeast. Highs of 24, 25, and then locally up to 27 for London. Into the weekend, the increasing risk of some showery rain across the north and the west, and temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening, I'm Bethany Elsey here to bring you up to date on GB News. Rail strikers have caused massive disruption across the UK today, and it's not over yet. Train drivers at 9 rail companies with the union ASLEF have announced another day of strike action on the 13th of August in a dispute over pay. That's in addition to their planned action this Saturday. That's as more than 40,000 workers walked out today in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services were running and some areas had no trains at all. Network Rail says more passengers were attempting to travel during last month's industrial action, despite a warning to only travel if absolutely necessary. Trade union leaders have condemned Labour for sacking a minister after he joined a picket line in support of the rail workers. The Shadow Transport Minister, Sam Tarry, has been removed from the front bench after defying Sir Keir Starmer's ban on appearing at the demonstrations. The TSSA General Secretary, Manuel Cortez, has said he's ashamed of Labour and claimed the party will lose the next election if it alienates union members. The Foreign Secretary says she welcomes Rishi Sunak's pledge to cut VAT on energy bills, but she's challenged him to do more to reverse the rise in national insurance. It's after the former Chancellor unveiled his new winter plan to tackle inflation and the cost of living crisis. He said he'd scrap VAT if the price cap exceeds £3,000. Ms Truss's campaign declared the move a screeching U-turn, as throughout the Tory leadership contest, Mr Sunak repeatedly branded her tax cut plans as comforting fairy tales.
I always argue my case in private, but follow collective cabinet responsibility. I was clear at the time we shouldn't have raised national insurance. We had a manifesto commitment not to. And we know that families are struggling across the country with the cost of living. That's why I want to reverse the rise to help families cope with the very difficult economic times that we face.
And legal history will be made tomorrow when a Crown Court broadcasts the sentencing remarks in a criminal trial for the first time. The Old Bailey in central London is expected to become the first court in England and Wales to allow the live televised sentencing when the case of a convicted killer is heard. 25-year-old Ben Oliver pleaded guilty at an earlier hearing to the manslaughter of his grandfather, David Oliver, in South London. Only the judge will be filmed, though, during sentencing, which is expected to be broadcast tomorrow morning. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Let's get back to headliners.
Hello, I'm Andrew Doyle and welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight is one of the most talented comedians working on the UK comedy circuit today, Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon.
Every night, the same joke.
I mean,
Get a new joke.
I delivered it with a slightly different tenor.
I'm not blaming you, I am blaming Martin, our producer.
Our producer who wrote the auto cue. Well, let's not get him involved because he'll get angry and he'll write something worse tomorrow if you keep this up.
Got good taste.
He has got good taste. Let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. We're going to start with the Daily Mail, and that runs with victory for free speech and women. That is, of course, the Alison Bailey case, which we will, of course, be covering. Onto the Telegraph, accidental nuclear war with China, a growing risk. And that, of course, is something we were also going to get to. Moving on to The Guardian now. Unions issue general strike threat as rail crisis grows. And there's also a picture there of James Lovelock, who died, the climate prophet and pioneer of science. Moving on to the Financial Times. They're leading with Fed lifts rates by 0.75 points for second month in a row. That's, of course, the battle to tame inflation. Moving on to the Mirror now. Shocking. Just shocking. That's it. One word. I love those one-word headlines. Very dramatic. Energy bills could hit £500 for just 1 month this winter. It's extravagant, isn't it? On to the front cover of the Times now. Talk to our enemies or run risk of nuclear war. And an image there of Alison Bailey with J.K. Rowling, her friend. As we'll get to in a moment, Alison Bailey has won her victory over her chambers in her discrimination case. Moving on to the Star now. And they go with Grease is the word. And these are some tips to stop a drought this summer, which include don't wash your hair and take a shower for just 5 minutes and use the same dirty teacup all day. The Star on the pulse of current affairs there. And those are your front covers. And we begin with Thursday's Telegraph, and a fairly light headline to start the show, Steve.
Yeah, so try and keep this snappy, shall I? Accidental nuclear war with China, growing risk.
Yay!
And this is according to Sir Stephen Lovegrove. This is the UK's national security advisor, saying that we could accidentally end up in a nuclear war with China. Now, I've had many an accident in my time, but you'd think you don't have to call up one of those, have you had an accident at work, things over a war.
No.
But the part of what this is about is how the way in which we communicated with back in the old days, back in the Cold War days, there was a system in place where there was more rules of engagement, effectively,
yes.
which was rules of no engagement because we would wipe each other off the planet.
Yes.
And without
mutually assured destruction, that was the idea.
Without this dialogue, we might not have this mutually assured destruction. But I've been reading through this thinking, surely our goals are still aligned as much as neither one of us wants to be wiped off the globe.
Yes. Well, is there an added problem that we are quite dependent on China? I mean, you saw these major corporations pulling out of Russia in protest over the war in Ukraine, but they don't really have much to lose there financially, whereas pulling out of China, that's not going to happen, is it? I mean, is this going to cause trouble as well?
That is a separate trouble in its own right, and horribly, it's actually a solution to this.
Really?
Because
Why?
actually, well, if we are so dependent on China, and there was a story we talked about on the show recently about even our university research requires China. If suddenly we break ties, we won't know as much. Then actually what that means is we will just be beaten before we even get to the nuclear weapons.
I mean, that's a problem, though, as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard stories about how Chinese investment in American universities often involves changing what is taught on those various programs. And so this kind of influence is a little pernicious. I mean, I see in this article, Liz Truss has described the malign influence of China. So she's coming up quite hawkish about this, isn't she, Nick?
Yes. Well, this story, it's only just dropped, but it is quite concerning, as you've said. I mean, my favourite sentence was, the West and China could miscalculate our way into a nuclear war. it's a heck of a miscalculation. It's like miscalculating your way into a volcano. Do you know what I mean? It's arguably worse.
Yeah.
So that is shocking because everyone was concerned about China being emboldened to invade Taiwan or whatever because of Russia, and they were waiting and seeing how that goes. But somehow this is even worse. But like you say, Liz Truss is being quite bold on it, and Sunak claims to be a China hawk, but now there's these stories that he might not be. He was close to signing an economic agreement with Beijing earlier in the year. So it's like, who's really the anti-China candidate? And we've had these things, like you say, we've had the Huawei thing, the Five Eyes thing, where we're trying to get out of more and more Chinese technology because it always seems to be spying on you.
Yeah, it does rather. But the problem is you are dealing with a state that doesn't play by the same rules. Certainly not when it comes to human rights, certainly not when it comes to digital surveillance technology and that kind of thing. And there's these tensions that are bound to come to a head at some point. I worry about the situation with Taiwan. Isn't the Chinese government suggesting they've got a 2025 deadline for when Taiwan will be theirs? And you've got Nancy Pelosi going to visit there next month. That's going to spark a whole big thing. I mean, is this just a powder keg waiting to explode, Steve?
Oh, and there's even more powder in it, because as much as we're sitting here talking about nuclear war, don't worry, it's not just that. He also said, this is Stephen Lovegrove, it's a new age of proliferation with threats from genetic weapons, space-based systems and lasers.
Great.
Just in case you weren't worried enough.
So we're all doomed. Let's move on to Thursday's Telegraph. Hopefully this will be a bit brighter. And it seems to be one strike and you're out for Labour shadow ministers, Steve.
Yeah, Keir Starmer has sacked Shadow Transport Minister for joining the rail strike, which is better. I think the Telegraph deals with it better than the Mail Online, which went with the headline, Keir sacks Angela's boyfriend.
Oh, dear.
As if it's gossip, like you'll never guess what happened.
This is Sam Tarry, to give him his proper name rather than just Angela Rayner's boyfriend, although he is Angela Rayner's boyfriend.
Yeah, that's not the reason he's been sacked.
No.
It's because in part, it's because he went to the picket line of the strike. Also, there's an argument, because that's your main headline. Your main headline is, are we sacking people for going to strikes now? Is that the position the Labour Party's taking? Surely they should be pro-union, but at the same time, it's the easiest low-hanging fruit win to say Labour Party's in the pocket of the unions. So actually, this is a good stance, maybe. But if you read the rest of the article, there's one theory that actually maybe he was trying to get sacked.
Yes, what's all that about? I read this, but it doesn't... Why would he do this?
Well, and it's really vague, isn't it? It says being reselected.
Yes.
And he might get sympathy in his local, I think it's Ilford. So we're going for sympathy by being
They
sacked.
don't do sympathy in Ilford.
No.
I don't think they're capable there. Nick, what do you make of this? I mean, isn't it the case, though? I mean, I know Keir Starmer's had a lot of flack for not standing up for the strikers generally. We've had lots of strikes recently, and, of course, the party is called Labour.
There is that. Exactly, and that's why I'm sort of torn, because the train strike's very annoying. It made me get here later tonight, and it is annoying, especially tube strikes are absolutely disastrous for London. But I do sort of almost respect the old Labour way of doing things. My granddad was a big union man, very proud Labour voter. And this is actual, like you say, an actual Labour type of thing to do, is have strikes and unions. And then so it is quite amusing that Starmer has said, no, none of that, please. But, of course, he's chosen this stance, which is basically to be a sort of neoliberal with weird woke things on the side, which is a lot of people now.
He doesn't really commit to anything, though, does he?
No, but that's quite a stance. I call it, I mean, you see it in North London all the time, I call it the new normie. They're basically neoliberals who are sort of Blairites on the economy. Then they, kneel for BLM on the weekends. It's all very odd. But he has to really be seen to be doing something here, because the whole thing is he wants to be seen as the government in waiting, especially now with the Tories in disarray.
Yes.
So the whole thing is he can't be seen to be striking, which is a kind of inherently oppositional stance, and you can't really take a stand against yourself if you're the government. So he's trying to look as governmental as possible.
Yeah, but the party is suggesting that the reason why Sam Tarry has been ditched, is not to do with him joining the picket line. It's him breaching collective responsibility.
Right.
In other words, not doing what he's told. I mean,
But it's the same thing, really, isn't it? Because the policy is you can't go on the picket lines.
Right.
So really, that's the same point.
Yeah.
Yeah, although the best theory, one person lower in the article said, well, there was an edict not to join the strikes for the last strike, but no one ever mentioned this one.
Right, well, that sounds like a loophole to me. Yeah, all right. Thursday's Sun next, and a new legal proposal from our potential new Prime Minister. Does this affect your daily activities?
Well, yes, Andrew. It's wolf whistling and street harassment of women would become illegal under Liz Truss PM plans. So, now, well, you've put me in a tricky position already, Andrew. I mean, I don't exactly want to die on the wolf whistling harassment hill. I don't want to die on harassment hill.
You don't.
And this is how they corner you with this kind of thing, because you... At the same time, you wonder, is this overreach? But if you look into it in more detail, it's apparently that only reoffenders who are wolf whistling many, many times will be, or multiple times, will be in trouble. But already that does seem like an overreach to me.
Is wolf whistling harassment?
Well, that's the question. And
that's the question, yes.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, is it really, you ask yourself, is it really necessary? Is it government overreach? Is it a conservative policy? Is this another attack on men? There's a weird attempt in the Times to kind of link it. I don't know if it's the Times doing this or Liz Truss herself. The sentence was the Foreign Secretary said she would make it an offence to harass women on the street as she paid tribute to Sarah Everard. So to me, it strikes me as a little bit of like doing something rather than doing nothing. You remember when David Ames was horribly murdered, and then it's like, oh, we need to talk about online safety. So yes, obviously Sarah Everard, those things are horrific, but wolf whistling is not. I mean,
this is what it's doing. It's doing what a lot of the things during the Me Too campaign did. Is it conflates very, very serious things. I mean, it talks here about Liz Truss saying she's going to introduce this new sex offenders register for domestic abusers, obviously an incredibly serious thing. And then within that, you have wolf whistling mentioned. I've spoken to feminists who say, well, for God's sake, if someone whistles at me, I can just shrug it off and move on or tell them where to go. I don't need to be pampered and patronised in this way. So these, I mean, is it helpful to bring these very serious things with something which may be puerile and a bit invasive, but ultimately isn't that big a deal?
No, it's better to separate them and solve them as separate problems. And I think it is a problem. Anyone can find someone who says, oh, I actually miss being wolf whistled at, but also you can find people who say it is annoying.
I haven't heard that. I've just heard people say, I don't need legal protection for me to deal with it.
And that was going to be my point, that regardless of the spectrum of opinions on wolf whistling, you don't fix it by laws, you fix it by maybe education. Maybe know a woman and have a conversation about it, and you'll realise, oh, yeah, maybe it is a bit of an icky thing to do. And a good steer for life is don't be too icky.
I'm surprised people
still
do
it.
It is. It's not great. I haven't done it in weeks. But the point is that, as well, is it a waste of police resources? We see such a waste of police resources all the time now. Now the police are knocking on people's doors if they're untoward towards paedophiles. So, the police are wasting their time. But there are some good things in it. Truss has promised to speed up rape cases that have taken too long in the slow criminal justice system. So obviously that's good. But the wolf whistling thing gets the headline because it's a bit silly.
Absolutely. Nick, I'd like to apologise for wolf whistling you earlier, but I do like that jacket and it makes you look really good.
Well, I understand your preferences, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Thursday's Financial Times now, and a winter of discontent looms large on the horizon. Steve?
Yep, European gas prices surged 30% in 2 days because Russia said, maybe you don't have so much gas.
That's a lot.
What bothers me about this story, it is a lot, and the prices are now tenfold what they were between 2010 and 2020.
Yes.
So this is a huge amount. If you want to get into the nerdy numbers, it's €210 per megawatt hour. I'm sure that's cleared it up.
Oh, that's totally clarified it. Yeah. I was going to ask you about what is it, megawatts?
Megawatt hours.
I was going to ask you about the megawatt hours.
Yeah, I could round it up to maybe the megawatt, quarter of an hour, maybe.
I'm not sure. Having a sciencey person on, you speak a different lingo.
Although I do hate these units because the watt, all you're doing, to get a watt, you take joules, you divide it by time, and then you're timesing it by time again to make it into energy. We've already got energy units. Come on.
I was about to say that.
Is this the main part of that story? I thought it was more about geopolitics.
Yeah, this is the accusation that Russia might be weaponising gas. No. I mean, it doesn't...
Well, they don't say. They say this is turbine maintenance
Yeah,
issues.
That's a great line as well. Oh, we can't fix the turbine. All these sanctions, you're not allowing turbine parts.
Just coincidentally, this is happening at the same time as the war and the sanctions. But, Nick, this is... we've had lots of conversations on the programme about how we need to be a bit more independent when it comes to energy.
Yeah, and we are in Britain, of course. We take something like 3%. I've heard 5% from Russia. Obviously, Germany, it's way higher. And that's why Trump famously claimed to give Merkel a white flag. I think it was just a napkin, but he said this is the white flag because you've essentially surrendered to Russia. And this is it. Morality aside, Putin has been obviously very shrewd in terms of... We're talking about all these sanctions on Russia, but it turns out he's actually planned this much better and is strangling Europe, by owning the gas supply. And the irony is that we're all worried about Russia's military. And that seems to have been a bit of a disappointment from what we can gather. I say disappointment if you're Putin. That seems to have been a bit of a damp squib. But this is where he's actually winning the war, the kind of soft war of gas.
Well, he definitely is, because, if this article is to be believed, they're talking here about how politicians are saying that gas is going to have to be rationed for businesses, for factories, even households. Can that be the case?
But that's our own fault, isn't it? Because not only should we not have been in a position where we were so dependent as the West on Russia, but as soon as we were having those conversations, it looks like we've done nothing. So they just turned down the tap a little, and look what it does to us. It's like buying from a dodgy drug dealer, getting hooked on it, and then wondering why he nicked your watch. You should have seen this coming all along.
Excellent analogy. The Alison Bailey case now from Thursday's Daily Mail. Nick, this is a big story.
Yeah, victory for free speech and women, my two favourite things. And this is Alison Bailey. And you know loads about this case, Andrew, so I hardly need to tell you, but I'll tell the viewer because she's won this case against Garden Court Chambers. This all kicked off she was a founder of is a founder of the LGBT, what's it called?
LGBT
the LGBT Alliance. Thank you very much. And as soon as she announced that she was part of the LGBT Alliance, Garden Court Chambers put these tweets out about her, saying they were going to investigate her. And then she's won $22,000 in damages against them. She hasn't actually won the case technically against Stonewall, but it doesn't look very good for Stonewall because they were the ones advising the Garden Court Chambers. I think there was an email, I think from her in 2018, correct me if I'm wrong, saying that they shouldn't get involved with them as diversity champions. This diversity champion scheme we've talked about before, which is a bit this dodgy scheme where Stonewall says, you can be a diversity champion. How do you do that? Oh, you get training from Stonewall that you have to pay for. So this is Stonewall. You know, hopefully this is another, for me, hopefully it's another death blow for Stonewall because, you know, the other day we saw the tweet, I've got it here from them, when they said research suggests that children as young as 2 recognise their trans identity, yet many nurseries and schools teach a binary understanding of pre-assigned gender. So they then had to walk that back. And they said, oh, on Friday we put out a tweet that was unclear. It's like, no, it was clear, bro.
It was pretty clear.
You want to move on to try and trans 2-year-olds because that's your market.
So this is
incredibly sick.
And this, you know, there is a real problem. You know, increasingly, as I was talking about on my show on Sunday, increasingly gay people don't feel that Stonewall represents them, actually works against their interests. But this case is a particularly interesting one, isn't it? Because the way in which people have spun it. So Stonewall have said it's a victory for Stonewall because obviously she was suing Garden Court Chambers and Stonewall, but she lost against Stonewall but won against Garden Court Chambers. But of course, what that means is that the court said, yes, the advice from Stonewall was wrong, was unlawful, they were misrepresenting the law, etc. But the Garden Court Chambers didn't have to take the advice of Stonewall, so the responsibility lies with them. But for Stonewall to claim this as a victory is insane because they've just cost Garden Court Chambers with their shoddy advice a fortune, and all of these other companies that currently have the Diversity Champion scheme surely are going to back away at this point, Steve.
So the best case scenario would be that it's a PR loss because legally, I think this article in the Times actually goes through step by step and looks at the legal problems.
Yes.
And therefore, the outcome might not be what the headlines look like, what other newspapers might report. But in part, that's because of the difficulty of making that legal thing stick.
But isn't it more than PR? I mean, they have been accused again and again, Stonewall that is, of misrepresenting equality law for their own ideological purposes, right? They've been accused of effectively lobbying, rewarding the Scottish government with extra points in their index if they agitate to change the law according to what Stonewall wants. This is all very dodgy, slippery stuff.
I take that point, but anything lower than a legal outcome is just PR, isn't it? I don't know if there is a gap in between.
Okay, no, that could be the case, but surely, okay, let's say it is PR. Bad PR of this kind, when you are advertising your services to advise on equality law and a court says you are getting that wrong and this company is now going to have to pay millions, that's not, or whatever it is, I don't know how much they're paying, but that is such bad PR because that's their sole raison d'etre, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also it shouldn't have been before, but and yet somehow is now.
Yeah, it's an odd.
And BBC obviously backed out of the diversity scheme last year.
Yeah.
And Liz Truss, like you said, advised lots of people to back out of it, although a disturbing amount still remain in it.
I mean, loads.
Yes. Was it 327 you said in one or something like that?
There's 320 odd. The Foreign Office is still there, the Department of Work and Transport.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. The House of Lords, the Labour Party in its entirety, the Green Party, the SNP. I mean, the extent of Stonewall's influence and reach is so extreme. But we have to reach a point where whatever you feel, whether you support Stonewall or whether you don't, we have to accept, don't we, that they are massively divisive. They just are.
Absolutely.
And also, the point from this story is, regardless of your opinion on the details of the story, one of the outcomes is you shouldn't lose work because of it.
Right.
And I think that is a solid foundation to then have a
Let's bring it back to Alison Bailey here because, black lesbian who was effectively, she claims, was targeted by Stonewall. Stonewall basically tried to stir up trouble and get her in trouble with her employers. That was the claim. And look, shouldn't Stonewall be defending people like Alison Bailey, people who have been fighting for gay rights for decades, is a stalwart of the cause, and is a black lesbian?
You'd think, but didn't you say that up until 2015 they were perhaps doing that, and then they moved on their focus onto trans issues because they kind of completed, that had been completed, so it's like, oh, we still need a reason to exist. So, yeah, I think Bailey sums it up really well here, by the way, just to sum up what we've said, when she said that she's exceeded in exposing Stonewall's conduct and the enormous, to my mind, malign influence it wields in the workplace and in society more generally. So that's it. She has technically lost the case against Stonewall, but she's exposed what they're up to.
Absolutely. I think what this proves, though, is that when you do try to put the LGB with the T, you're fighting for two very different campaigns. Gender identity is unrelated to sexual orientation. They're different causes. So the solution surely is that we have gay rights campaigns groups like LGBT Alliance, and we have trans rights campaign groups like Mermaids, and they can both lobby for what they want. But conflating them, as Stonewall have done, I think it's proven it doesn't work, right? Right. Well, that's my rant over on that. On to Thursday's Guardian now. Bad news for court sketch room artists, Steve.
Yes, because it's going to get televised. Crown Court sentencing remarks could be televised. Great, we all need more competition. Or other alternative, as if there aren't enough criminals on TV already. I had either one to go at the top. It's up to you what you want to do with that. So the Old Bailey will be opening up to cameras on Thursdays. It's quite a swift move.
Is this going to be like a Judge Judy situation?
I imagine, hopefully, classier than that. The goal is to try and let people see some of the details behind sentencing. And there was a line in the article that said it will help the public get a better understanding of how sentencing decisions are taken. It's a lofty goal. I still think we public will be angry at the verdicts that the newspapers tell us to be angry to. Because that's just how it works.
I mean, isn't this just prurience, though? Isn't it? Isn't it? You know, isn't it a bit like the OJ case, or one of those cases which is open and it becomes really, it feels fictionalised. Then it feels like a soap opera.
I don't think we'll ever be like that. Like the subplot through Cable Guy. Remember that film?
I didn't see that.
All right, but I don't think we're going to be like that in the UK. I mean, there might be the odd one where you watch it for the wrong reasons, but whilst watching it for the wrong reasons, you might learn greater detail about how justice is dealt.
Well, that's what they're claiming. They're saying it's going to improve transparency and restore confidence in the justice system. Nick?
Yes, that's the benign take, that it improves transparency. And obviously, like you say, the reality is it will increase this kind of lurid spectacle, which is bound to happen. We're going to become more and more American. And much like we have with the Tory leadership debates, which is one criticism of those, and of course we're going to lose those nice little drawings that we
I
enjoy
like
so
the drawings. I think stick with the drawings. I'm all for artistic expression. That's all for part one. Coming up, we've got new nudity rules, accusations of a lack of rigidity, and Irish slaves. No, I'm not talking about my last holiday in Belfast. These are actual stories. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm still Andrew Doyle, and they are still Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. On to Thursday's Mail. Potentially remarkable news here, Steve.
It is great. City of Hope patient, 66, cured of HIV after receiving, they say, dangerous stem cell treatment. You can see where the problem in this story is straight away.
Yes.
It is amazing. The fourth person who's managed to be cured of HIV.
Yes, because not just sort of being able to live with it, the medication, actually cured. It's gone.
By having a transplant of stem cells, of bone marrow, effectively, producing this stuff from someone who had a genetic mutation, which meant they were immune to HIV.
Right.
So you can transplant that from someone into a new host, and then they also fight off the HIV. They've done the tests. He's now no longer needing any medication for it. Of course, the problem is you can't scale this up. I mean, how are you going to get so many... Well, imagine the poor people who've got the genetic mutation who just have to be farmed to try,
I see. Can't you just replicate? I mean, I don't know about...
No. Plus, also, it's a dangerous enough operation, and with HIV not being the life sentence that the 1980s wanted us to think, actually, your risk-cost analysis, or whatever they call it, wouldn't work.
So that's an important point, isn't it? So these days, your life expectancy as someone with HIV is the same as someone without.
Yeah.
Because the medication has advanced so far.
But having this kind of operation is risky. So the number of people who would die during it, if you've got bone marrow involved, any kind of operation is risky.
But doesn't this suggest that we will eventually develop this technology further?
Yes, and that would be the hope. These are great steps forward. The fourth person is just effectively, not to take away from this person, but steps along the research path. And at some stage, there won't be the risk associated, there'll just be the benefit.
Nick, any thoughts on this one?
Not loads, other than great news, of course, but it's just a bit suspicious to me. They've cured this just as they bring out monkeypox, which is like the new version.
I knew your conspiratorial mindset would find something within
Just raising
this.
the question, just asking questions.
Yeah, where's Bill Gates been in all of this?
Well, aren't you suspicious of monkeypox?
No. Well, I mean, insofar as it's a new disease that we need to be wary of, particularly gay men. Anyway, let's move on to Thursday's Telegraph now. And when is a nipple okay?
Good question, Andrew, but we should really focus on the show. This is... So, Instagram Supreme Court to review transgender nudity rights after removal of topless photographs. So, this is a big question: is whether it's medical. Is it medical or is it porn? Always a tough one for those with a dentist fetish. But basically, what it is that Instagram, famously, you're not allowed to be topless on Instagram, free the nipple, etc. But this was a non-binary couple who posted topless photographs to celebrate the fact that one of them was getting so-called top surgery,
which is a mastectomy, right?
Whether the breasts are reduced in size or removed, and they said, well, this shouldn't be taken off. And so Meta's policy, Instagram's parent company, of course, states that medical or in a medical or health context, you shouldn't take it down, essentially. So they're saying, why has it been taken down? It's important that transgender bodies are not censored, but it's been taken down because it's classed under porn by a bot.
So again, we are getting to this distinction between the difference between biological reality and identity. And people just seem to think this is... So, in other words, there's a female in the photo who is topless. And the algorithm obviously sees it as a female, but the female identifies as non-binary.
Bigoted algorithms.
And right.
That's the problem.
But I mean, I suppose the feminist argument would be, well, men and women should all be able to be topless. That would actually solve it.
Yeah, that's silly as well, isn't it?
Well, I don't know, Steve,
what? Hashtag free the nipple. Why is that silly?
It's silly because men's nipples are just not sexualised in the same way. So it's obviously not the same.
Very, very 1980s thinking.
Oh, I'm aiming for 50s.
1950s.
I'm sorry, I've only hit 80s.
Nipples, no, get them all out. But actually, this story would be more about... It doesn't even need to mention gender. Because if you think about it, the rules talk about whether it's medical or not. This would be medical. The algorithm gets it wrong for that. So I'm not sure why the story then has to spin out into whether these people were non-binary or not. That does seem to be allowed.
Yes.
Because it's medical. It's certainly not titillatory.
Well, it depends who's looking at it.
No, well, I think the intention is the reason you take something down. Because you could put any picture up and someone find it sexually attractive. You can't cancel pictures just because someone was turned on by it. The intention of posting it's the issue.
OK, Nick?
I'm not so sure. I'm not totally convinced, because if the idea is presumably that children are seeing it or something, if children are seeing a breast, they're seeing a breast, aren't they? So it doesn't really matter about the intention of the poster.
Then you'd have to cancel all the medical ones that are currently allowed.
Yeah, that's true as well.
And also, what about, you walk around the Vatican, there's lots of breasts around the Vatican. I mean, in statue
I don't,
form.
because I'm Protestant, but I see what you mean.
Yeah.
One does.
Yes, one does. Anyway, good news if you're a voyeur now from Thursday's Daily Star. Steve.
No, bad. Google will hand over video footage from your home to police without your permission.
What?
No. I'm not saying I do things at home that I don't want the police to see, but I'm going to have to move out of the way of my Ring doorbell. This is... So like Amazon...
What is it? Is it just the Ring doorbell? Is there a device that films you as well as... I know Alexa is listening.
Yep. You can get Nest devices. There are some baby webcams. We've got two. One of them's like a travel one, but if you plug it in, it can connect to Google, and then they would tell the police.
So why is it that liberty and groups that are all about, civil liberties, they're not up in arms about this stuff? They seem awfully quiet about even spyware and all this kind of stuff.
Well,
Why aren't they more
just
upset?
to slightly puncture it, actually, the Google policy says if we reasonably believe that we could prevent someone from dying or suffering from serious physical harm, we provide the information to a government agency, for example.
Right. That's where it starts, Steve.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Now you sound like me. That's what I was going to say. That's where it starts.
I think this is a fair point. I know how surveillance works. I've seen The Lives of Others, that film.
Exactly. And you've seen the lives of others through your surveillance.
I've done it as well. I'm always watching you when you're preparing for this show through my little camera.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same as you, Andy. You start off with, it's because we're trying to prevent someone dying, and then you end up with cashless society, social credit scores, Klaus Schwab's running your life.
Yeah.
Although you say no one's caught up, surely people like Big Brother Watch are aware of this.
Yes, that's true. They have made some noise about it.
I will say my favourite part of the article is down the bottom where it says Google have been approached to comment and then didn't. Oh, tight-lipped about something, are we?
They want their privacy.
Thursday's Guardian next, and apparently Trump is dealing with a flaccid Pence. See what I did there, Nick?
It's not. Yeah, I saw it. It's not quite as good as you think, this story. Pence has erect posture but flaccid conscience, says ex-Trump officials. This is Miles Taylor, who was formerly at the Department of Homeland Security. He wrote this famous column under the anonymous name, and he wrote a book that was some sort of Trump hit piece called A Warning. And he's basically saying that Pence didn't stand up to Trump, when it mattered.
Right.
I'm not quite sure what the aim of it is, because famously Trump has fallen out with Pence because he didn't back him over the stolen election.
Yes.
And
stolen election.
Well, I'm just quoting what Trump would say. I'm not suggesting that it was
just
stolen.
coincidentally, it's what you believe, but that's.
I'm not saying one thing or another. Things happen, elections happen. Some of them are fair, but I don't know what I'm allowed to. This is all satire, Ofcom. So basically, he said that Pence is weak and didn't stand up to Trump. But the thing is, Trump doesn't like Pence anyway anymore, and Pence has now endorsed Karen Taylor in Arizona instead of Trump's pick, which is Carrie Lake. So they're already up against it. And the interesting part to me is not this guy's little jibe, it's who's going to be Trump's VP.
Yes.
Because is it going to be DeSantis? But surely DeSantis wants to run on his own. Is it going to be Tim Scott, Glenn Youngkin, Ted Cruz even, whatever you call him, Lion Ted could come back.
Any quick thoughts on this,
whatever
Steve?
he called him.
Yeah, Brill, get Trump back, because I miss finding it easy to write jokes.
Well, there is that. And he was funnier than any of us, let's be honest. So, reparation demands now from Thursday's Telegraph. Steve, what's this about?
Telecoms tycoon Dennis O'Brien's campaigned for reparations in the Caribbean. Well, so he's really rich, from Ireland, like the richest man, founded his mobile network out there, Digicel. It spans now more than 30 countries and boasts an annual sale of $550 million. So just that's context.
Yes.
He's got the money. There's a charitable foundation linked to it that's already donating tens of millions towards development projects and helping out various ways. And now he wants to be the connection between both sides to negotiate reparations.
Right.
Which is... It's a tricky... I don't think one person could do it. It's a debate that could go on forever.
Well, it could, because you're never going to satisfy everyone when it comes to reparations.
You'd need it to be almost dispassionately done with a bit of accountancy, but realistic accountancy. Like whether a trade with a country will actually have corrected so many problems from the past. Surely we can agree some of the things that were done would have cost a country.
But how can you quantify any of this stuff? He's talking about Ireland here, Do I get reparations because my ancestors were massacred by Oliver Cromwell, which may have had knock-on effects? Who knows? Well, maybe we would have been millionaires if it weren't for that.
But in part, the way you'd look at it would be paying for infrastructure for a nation rather than individuals.
I see.
You could help the GDP of a country and then they could spend it on infrastructure, but I don't think you're getting a cheque.
Well, I should. Nick, what do you think?
Well, I just want to briefly run through my list of hobby horses because it's so relevant to this, which is that there are more slaves alive now than ever. We don't talk about that. Britain ended slavery. Every culture or race has been slaves at one point or another. No other countries worry about this stuff like China. As you hinted with Ireland there, Turkey don't come out apologising for the Ottoman Empire and offering reparations. Our empire was unique in that it was the most relatively benign empire. And also, in a sort of royal flush of my little concerns, this O'Brien character was hanging out at the World Economic Forum. So, of course, they want to enslave everyone right now.
Wow. That's quite a list of hobby horses you've got there. well done for getting through them, though. And that is part 2 over with. Coming up, Nick will be giving a balanced analysis of last night's Women's Euro semi-final result. Steve will be discussing his favourite show, Love Island. and bumblebees have had enough. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, Steve N. Allen, and the big dog himself, Nicholas Dixon. Now, according to Thursday's Mail, over 11 million people watched England's Euro semi-final last night. Can you imagine that many people watching your semi, Nick?
Outrageous. No comment. But England, yes, they did. 11.3 million watched England's 4-0 mauling of Sweden, is what Daily Mail's calling it. And yeah, the TV audience reached 9.3, additional 2 million viewers, blah, blah, blah. And it's all great. And I'm very glad England won, but now I'm about to give a contrarian, sort of misanthropic take on it, which is that I was in the pub after my five-a-side football game, which is the only game I care about, and we went in, and at the end of the game, because it's North London, everyone applauded in a kind of theatrical way. Then I made a joke about the game to the football lads, thinking this will be funny. They all just stared at me. It wasn't me, because I made several really funny jokes throughout the night, so I was on fire. But I suddenly realised this is the new current thing we can't criticise. We all have to love the women's football. I'm not that bothered personally, but I'm glad they won 4-0. It's all great.
But isn't the issue here that 11.3 million viewers? That suggests, doesn't it, that women's football is becoming mainstream?
It's becoming mainstream. I'm being grumpy, and I'm a terrible person. But the goal that everyone was thrilled, because I said the keepers aren't very good. And now I was looked at as if I'd said something awful, because the keepers used to be not that good at women's football, and now apparently that's a terrible thing to say. But if you watch the backheel goal that was very celebrated, it was a very clever backheel, but the keeper should have done better. Sorry to sound like Roy Keane. I know this means nothing to any of you two, but the keeper, it just rolled straight past the keeper. She let it in. The only time I've seen a goal like it, for the viewers at home, was Dennis Law in 1974, Man City versus Man United. He used to play for Man United, and they didn't want to win the game because it was going to send Man United down and relegate them. So he didn't even want to score. So he did a back heel because he didn't want to score, and it accidentally went in, and he was gutted. So it looked a bit like that, but he was much nearer the goal. There wasn't a defender in front of him. The back heel was soft, that's all I'm saying.
You're nitpicking.
I am. It's a great victory. England, yay,
I don't understand football. I would have thought for a goalie, just get the fattest woman, because there's less space for the ball to go in. Is that how it works?
I'm not sure that fits within my conception of body positivity.
OK.
I object to the phrase fattest woman.
Oh, well, you've gone from misogyny to full-on feminism, which I like. I like that.
Turn there,
what do you think, Steve? Because you're not a football fan, are you?
No, and I'm very fair in the fact that I'm not a football fan of men's football and women's football, because it's football. I mean, great that it happens, and it'll inspire other people to play football, and we should probably move around more and be less of a massively fat nation. So that's good, but as long as I don't have to do it and I can just slowly grow a beast.
I mean, I haven't watched women's football. Is it like, because I prefer women's tennis than men's tennis because you can watch it because it's not so quick. Is it like that? Is it like just a better version of football where you can actually see what's going on?
The serves are slower.
It's a much, much worse version of football. Sorry, but it is, isn't
Nick
it?
finally saying what he thinks. Right, one for the data analysis fans out there now. From The Guardian, this one, Steve.
This could almost get me into football. Smart scarf.
What is this smart scarf?
It's a scarf that if you're a Manchester City fan, a select few will get to wear a smart scarf that it's wearable tech, biometric sensors integrated into the fabric to monitor the physiological movement data. Basically, we can see which fans are closer to having a heart attack when a goal goes in. Stuff like that.
Yeah, but what's in it for the fans? That's what I don't understand. It just feels like they want to monitor you through your accessories.
Yeah, they say they can even monitor emotions. How? What? And if so, could I please have one to give to the missus? Because it'd just make it easier if my phone could go ping. Oh, that.
Yes.
I thought you meant an emotion to give your wife for a change. So this is Man City fans, and so the main emotion they'll be monitoring will be smugness, and they are doing very well at the moment, of course. Well done, City. But yeah, like you say, Andrew, it's an ostensibly fun way of smuggling in wearable tech. Starts off with a fun football scarf. Before you know it, cashless society, social credit source, Klaus Schwab, eating the bugs.
Yeah, and then the Terminator kills us all. Yeah, I'm not having it. Anyway, Thursday's Guardian now. And are games gay enough for you, Nick?
Well, it seems more of a question for you, Andrew, but I'll try and tackle it. Meet the gamers, and that's a pun with the word gay, and then like gay like a person. But gay, yeah, see what they've done?
That's actually a really good joke.
Why queer representation is exploding in video games.
They say The Guardian doesn't have a sense of humour, but with puns like that.
I know. The headline could have been Meet the Guardian, to be honest, because it's pure Guardian. It's a think piece about why more and more gay people are getting involved in video games. And, of course, it's great that they are, and they should be allowed to play them, Andrew. I do believe that. I'm not going to try and ban you.
You're looking at a champion of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, really?
I could complete that every time.
You are showing your age there, but
on my Mega Drive.
But my only problem with it, Andrew, is surely gaming is for young right-wing men making dark jokes to each other on the internet and working through their violent impulses in the safety of the video game world.
But that's what
so it's cultural appropriation for your lot to take it off.
Well,
not my lot, but people I know.
Look, I don't understand this because I thought my lot played games as well, don't they?
Well, I mean, there are some stories about homophobia and the attitude of chat that you get online. But I don't know, because I've not played an online game. The fact that they're online is terrifying. Why would you not just be playing on your own computer so no one sees how bad you are?
There's a big community, though. They're all interconnected, and people you talk with strangers and you shoot them and stuff.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is there's a lot of stuff in this article about representation. Is that I don't need Sonic to have a gay friend.
Well,
he does, doesn't he? He's got
I think he already,
flames. What is it? No, the little Knuckles. I think Knuckles is gay.
Yeah. Well, basically,
what's the point?
The point is that 21% of people working in the games industry identify as LGBTQ+, and they're going to give more games that are giving players options to remove binary gender selection and all this kind of thing, Andrew. So you'll be represented in the game with your...
it's so boring. I don't care what sexuality the characters in a computer game
You don't
are.
want a gay Sonic, is that what you're saying?
I couldn't care less what Sonic does. In his own bedroom, in his own time. It's got nothing to do with the game. I just want him to jump up and get those rings.
The spikes could be an issue.
Anyway, let's move on. Thursday's Guardian. And I should have listened to my pale-skinned, questionably pungent and square-eyed nephew, Steve.
Yeah, back to gaming, really. Video games have no effect on well-being, according to a new piece of research, which I suppose is good, because there are bound to be some people who think, oh, it's rotting, it's new, so it's rotting kids' brains. Any new technology means, oh, misery. Well, they've done an actual study of people actually playing it. Previous studies were self-reporting.
Yes.
This study isn't, and this study says no harm to well-being. So those self-reporting ones, what a cry for help that must have been.
Yeah.
But apparently, yes, if you play computer games, as long as you don't feel like you're obliged to, if you go into it feeling like, oh, this is going to be a bit much, it impacts you. And they also says the findings show that no link between gameplay and well-being. Other than extreme levels, there may be an effect if the player increases playtime by 10 hours a day. You do anything 10 hours a day, it's going to take it out of you.
Isn't this the problem with computer games, really, is their addictive nature and the fact that people waste their lives in a virtual world, Nick?
And that's why this is very silly. It says they have no effect on well-being. They obviously do. If you spend all your time playing games, have no life, unless you're one of those guys who gets paid to play Fortnite and you make millions off it, but they are very, very rare, and most of them don't get anywhere. There's an interesting discussion online the other day between Andrew Tate and a guy called Clicks, who was one of these Fortnite guys. He makes millions off it. But Tate made a very interesting point, that if you in the real world, if you have to battle and get towards something and you're building towards some sort of status, you learn a lot of lessons along the way. Whereas in the video game world, if you don't make it, you've just wasted a huge amount of time. I think there's some argument for that.
But people used to spend hours... Rod Stewart likes miniature train sets. That is a waste of human endeavour, isn't it? At the end of building that, you've built a small
Well, I suppose
train.
any obsession. I had to delete Robot Unicorn Attack off my phone because I was spending hours a day on it. I was late for work, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't seeing my family. It was really serious stuff. I mean, it's like having a heroin addiction.
And have you got help for that now, Andrew?
I had a lot. Yeah, I had to go through all sorts of therapy.
As a group.
No, I just deleted.
represented.
I just deleted the game. It's quite a gay game. It's about a unicorn, and it uses an Erasure song as the main song. So yeah.
Because you're in a conspiracy mood tonight, Andrew, I want to point out the problem is when they're saying it's healthy reasons like intrinsic motivation, that's when it's good. When it's said to be or social fun, when it's said to be bad, is when there's a compulsion to satisfy goals set by the game.
Well, that's
like you
just
said,
the game.
The game's taking over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably unhealthy. Anyway, what do I know? On to a story that we three are all deeply passionate about. This is Love Island.
Love Island slammed with over 1,500 Ofcom complaints about misogynistic behaviour and bullying after Snog, Marry, Pie. They got over 5,000 Ofcom complaints in just 5 days. And what it was, Billy Brown set the tone for the shocking behaviour when he completely bypassed Danica Taylor, with whom he is partnered up with, which is a bit of a Love Island sentence. But she was left fuming, Andrew, fuming when Billy did not choose to kiss, marry, or even pie Danica, wouldn't even pie her.
Can you help me here? I don't know what pie is as a verb.
That just means to get rid of someone, pie them off. You don't even want anything to do with them.
I was imagining like a custard pie in the face.
Well, it might literally be that in the game, I'm not sure, but it means to mug them off and pie them off. You don't even want anything to do with them. And I love it here because he said she was left fuming. The next paragraph, Danica was left fuming. Like, she was really fuming, Andrew. I want to emphasise that. But the thing is, to me, you can't really watch Love Island for its morality. You know what I mean? You're watching it because it's a lurid spectacle highlighting the degeneracy of the culture, and that's the whole point. And you know what I mean?
I don't think that's why Love Island fans are watching
There's always complaints about gaslighting, misogyny, abuse. Lots of people have committed, not lots, but several have committed suicide. You used to be on it. You're not watching it because of the moral high ground.
Steve, I don't know who any of these people are. Should I care?
No, and you're safer off not caring. I think Love Island probably has a bit of a self-filtering nature in that if you're on Love Island, you're probably not the bestest of people. And it's not just this way around on gender. Was it last year or a couple of years ago? There was some woman who lost it so much at her boyfriend. I don't even know what the rules are. Maybe it's boyfriend or not. That there's a lot of toxic behaviour of everyone who's in these things. And there always will be. This is... They're not nice people.
You say that. I do have a friend who was a contestant on Love Island, Chris Williamson, who has a very good podcast. So, you know, we shouldn't tar them all with that brush.
Some of them have been on GB. They're very nice. Nothing wrong with the people. And Tommy Fury was on it, I like as well. I'm just saying the whole thing is not really where you go for moral guidance.
No, fair enough. OK, so Thursday's Daily Mail now. And if this insect gets any more rights, they're going to have to add another B into LGBTQ, aren't they, Steve?
Bumblebees, they do feel pain. Oh, all those regrets come flooding back of all the times. They've done a study, and researchers at Queen Mary University in London revealed that bumblebees can feel pain. Firstly, who tries to get a research grant? Oh, what are you going to do with a research grant? I'm going to cause pain to bees.
Is that how they find it out? What, do they just prod them with a stick and see if they go...
Almost. They give them 2 sources of sugar water. One of them is uncomfortably hot. And it said it was, like, noxiously hot. Oh, that's
See, I thought that with bees, because they're a hive creature, that, you know, they don't really fit... They don't act in such a way as they care about their individuality, do they? You know, if you kill one bee, it sends out a signal and the others come and swarm you, right? It's not really... And sometimes a bee will go and sacrifice itself to keep you away from the hive, right? So they don't really care.
No, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't feel pain. In fact, this is one of the things I think science really dropped the ball on. To presume that if you're a vertebrate, oh, yeah, pain, but invertebrates, they probably don't feel it. Surely we should imagine that evolution gives anything a pain system because it's really useful to not get your arm trapped.
Okay, what does it sound like Andrew was saying, because they don't have a sense of individual autonomy, he believes they can just be crushed mercilessly. But
I mean, I think that insects... We can't live in a world where we can't kill insects because every time you walk through a field, you're killing lots and lots of insects.
But that's the world we're about to enter, because fruit flies can also feel chronic pain.
Fruit flies?
It says it here. They feel chronic pain.
Sorry, fruit fly rights is what you're...
Reparations for fruit flies, that's what I'm saying.
See, this is... We just have to accept that we are at the top of the food chain and insects are going to get it. And we just can't...
Say, people kill spiders. I always take them out very carefully in some Tupperware.
I do.
And release them. And the comedy world says I'm a monster. But what about that, Andrew?
Well, apparently it's because they then starve to death.
Oh,
Yeah.
do they?
So that's actually worse what you're doing.
But why do they then starve? They're in the
Those-
same
those big
environment.
ones. Yeah.
No, so basically you've made it worse. You've tortured them.
Why? I let them out immediately.
Yes, but then they starve.
Why?
They would have been much better just being put out of their misery, Nick.
Why are they
Learn
starving?
the lesson and
Why
move
are they
on.
starving a few feet from where they already were?
It's the ones that would normally be growing in your house, ain't growing. The spiders that you just find in your house, they need to live.
They need to live inside, Nick. So can you just be a bit...
Well, they're bang out of luck because
You know
it's
what?
my house.
I tell you what, I don't get rid of spiders in the house because they're really good for the house and they're good for flies.
you're one of
Flies
those.
are much worse for you because they land on your food, they vomit on your food, they mash it all up and they suck it all back in.
On yours, maybe.
Well, not mine because it's vegan, but, your food, they go for yours. So I'd say definitely, spiders are great. Sticking with the Daily Mail, it turns out dogs can see with their noses. You have a similar ability, Nick, I think.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, dogs use their noses to see as well as smell. They've discovered an extensive pathway that allows dogs... So basically what it is, Andrew, you'll know this, the olfactory bulb, of course, is structured to... It's whatever. It's for odours. I'm not going to read it. We're too near the end of the show. Meanwhile, the occipital lobe, yes, is the one that's for visuals. But they're saying that in dogs, they come together and they're integrated. So actually, this is why dogs that are blind can distinguish between different objects because they're smelling the objects.
I don't know about that. My cousin had a blind dog, or a dog that went blind. He moved house, and it just kept colliding with everything, and he just had to learn not to bash his head. That was, he definitely could not see through that nose.
Maybe it's because the items of furniture weren't smelly enough. Because if they can navigate via smell, if you've just gone around and Febrezed everything, that's cruel.
Would that have been it?
Yeah.
But you can't. That's still not seeing through. Look, I don't know.
No, it's processing smell information in a visual part of your brain. So
I
then you
see.
could then have an internal model of what's in the room based on what you've smelled.
So someone can smell so bad you can see them, essentially.
Yeah.
OK. Thursday's Telegraph, and one of the worst ways to spend your birthday, Steve.
Yes, James Lovelock, scientist who first proposed the Gaia hypothesis, dies on 103rd birthday.
But that's not a bad innings.
Exactly.
Come on. That's really impressive.
Yeah, and also, I mean, given he spent most of his life thinking that the world was going to end due to climate change, to have reached that one and not been proved right yet, he must have been kind of
Done
happy.
very well. But so what is the Gaia theory?
That the Earth is one big, interconnected organism itself, because all organisms on the planet are somehow connected and they interact. It's not necessarily thoroughly believed by the scientific world, because, a bacteria on the pole might not necessarily interact with me. But in general, the point is you have a lot of interconnectivity.
OK.
All the people I know who believe in it seem to be mental, but that's hardly Lovelock's fault. And he was interested in that he believed in nuclear power. And he said that, Chernobyl thrived without people there. It wasn't the nuclear science. So this was his big claim. And he was very pro-nuclear.
Well, God bless him. And he did really well. And, he's 103, like I say.
Yeah.
So, it's sad. It's always sad when someone dies, but it's also quite wonderful when they've had a good innings, I think. Anyway.
It's more than I'm going to get, I'm fairly sure.
We'll be gone by, next month. Anyway, we end with the Daily Star and Saudi Arabia apparently have big plans, Nick. What's
Yes,
this about?
Saudi Arabia's insane 1 trillion jungle skyscraper will be better than the pyramids. Move over, Egypt. So they want to build this massive thing. It's called the Mirror Line. He wants to get it done by 2030. Which is the Crown Prince bin Salman. He said it will feature 1,600-foot tall buildings. People are worried that the buildings will be so tall they'll stop birds and animals migrating because the mirrored walls could confuse them. But apparently Trump has said it doesn't go far enough and called him a total loser. I made up the last bit.
Well, we're seeing it there, and
it
is very extreme.
It looks like the Lawnmower Man.
It does look a bit like something from the Lawnmower Man. Better graphics, I'll give it that. But this idea that they're saying this will be as interesting as good as the pyramids, but it won't be, will it? Look at that. I mean, that's soulless. The pyramids were far more sort of esoteric and
they were made by aliens as well.
And they were made by aliens, exactly. Look, now we're looking at the height. You've got the Empire State. This is taller than the Empire State.
They love doing that, don't they?
Of course they do. But I noticed this in Dubai. Everything in Dubai was manufactured to be much bigger than anything else, so that they must have the tallest building, the most garish colours, the highest fountain. Just everywhere you go, it was all about one-upmanship. It was really vulgar.
Yeah, I mean, if ever you want to find evidence that how money and oil interact is not particularly fair, they've got so much sloshing around, they just make big things. The idea of having a wall that's reflective, though, was it the walkie-talkie building in London that had a curve on it? So it was like a parabolic mirror.
Yes.
And focused the sun and melted cars. I'm just saying I'm not going for a walk anywhere near there, just in case they've made the same mistake.
Fair enough, and I'm not that impressed. You can flash your money around all you like, but no, not one for me. Anyway, I'm not going to be going to Saudi Arabia anyway, so it doesn't matter. That is all we have time for. I would like to thank my guests, Nick Dixon and Steve N. Allen. And don't forget, Headliners will be back tomorrow, where Steve will be in the hot suit. And who knows who else? See you tomorrow. Well, I won't, but he will. Bye.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tonight on Farage, the Sunak v Truss debates are not exactly inspiring the Conservative Party and movement. It's leading to a rebellion. 12,000 members signing a petition saying, put Boris on the ballot. We'll discuss, is that the right thing to do? The European Union are introducing gas rationing, as predicted months ago on this programme. We'll find out just how much trouble are they in. And joining me on Talking Pints, Andy Ungo, author and a man that's done his best to expose the violent tactics of Antifa. Before all of that, though, let's get the news.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. I am Bethany Elsey from the GB Newsroom. Commuters are facing significant travel disruption across the country today as rail workers go on strike again.
Our fight is a workers' fight. Solidarity!
More than 40,000 members of the RMT Workers' Union and 14 train operators have walked out in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. The Shadow Transport Minister, Sam Tarry, has been removed from the front bench for appearing at one of the many picket lines that have been formed outside of stations across the UK. He says he wants to thank the Labour leader for the last 2.5 years.
You know, in my view, being a real asset to the Labour Party and making sure that our agenda of progressive transport policies is put forward. But of course, it's a real shame today that for joining a picket line, for being on a picket line, standing shoulder to shoulder, not just with striking rail workers, but my former colleagues from the TSSA union, people that I know that are good friends from the RMT. You know, the decision today for people to go on strike was a massive one. Often many of the workers were low-paid workers, people on £25,000 a year, and I want to be part of a Labour Party and always stand up for a Labour Party that stands in solidarity with workers.
Legal history will be made tomorrow when a Crown Court broadcasts the sentencing remarks in a criminal trial for the first time. The Old Bailey in central London is expected to become the first court in England and Wales to allow the live televised sentencing when the case of a convicted killer is heard. 25-year-old Ben Oliver pleaded guilty at an earlier hearing to the manslaughter of his grandfather David Oliver in South London. Only the judge will be filmed during sentencing, which is expected to be broadcast tomorrow morning. MPs are accusing Rishi Sunak of making a U-turn after he pledged to cut VAT on domestic energy bills if he becomes Prime Minister. Unveiling his new winter plan to tackle inflation and the cost of living crisis, the former Chancellor said he'll scrap the VAT if the price cap exceeds £3,000. And a McDonald's cheeseburger is no longer 99p. The fast food giant has increased the price for the first time in more than 14 years, blaming inflation. It's now 20 pence more expensive, coming in at £1.19. McDonald's says a number of items on sale in its UK restaurants will go up by between 10 and 20 pence. It's the latest company to announce increasing prices after inflation hit a 40-year high. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, let's get back to Nigel.
Good evening. I have to say, I don't think the contest between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss is exactly catching fire. Rishi U-turning on tax policy already. Gosh, the contest has barely begun. As for Liz Truss, well, one or two interesting ideas, but wasn't it fascinating last night to see she wasn't capable of speaking for 60 seconds on why she should become Prime Minister without looking down at her notes 4 times. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It isn't a question of who is the best of these two. I just think Liz Truss happens to be the least worst. It's not inspiring, and many in the Conservative Party and movement are feeling that. And there's now a rebellion that is gaining steam, led by Lord Cruddas, backed up by former MEP David Campbell-Bannerman, and they've got a petition going of Conservative Party members to say, put Boris on the ballot. And so far, 12,000 paid-up Conservative members have signed it. We don't exactly know how many Tory party members there are, about 160,000 we think. So, hey, you know what? It's pushing up towards their target of 10%. One MP thus far has backed it, Michael Fabricant. So let me ask you, given that a poll out today says 50% of Conservative voters think he shouldn't have resigned, should we put Boris on the ballot? Let me know your views, please. Farage at gbnews.uk. I have to tell you, folks, this is the Conservative Party in the middle of an act of destroying itself. It isn't just the really quite vehement and quite personal debate that's taking place between the last two. It is the fact that even though the Boris attempt to get onto the ballot is likely, in my view, to fail, what the party's going to have is a brooding presence on the backbenches and somebody whose personality is way larger than the two finalist contestants added up together and multiplied by 10. I think the party is in for a period of real difficulty and an election defeat. That is my view. I don't think it makes any sense to put Boris back on the ballot. You see, you can argue that half of Conservative voters from 2019 think he shouldn't have resigned, but think about it this way. 50% of them think that he should have gone. And even if you're winning a big majority in Parliament, if half of your voters think your time is up, I think your time is up. Well, joining me to discuss whether Boris should be put back on the ballot and what his long-term presence is going to mean for the new leader is somebody that knows him well, worked with him in City Hall as an advisor and as a confidant. It's Colville. Ranger, welcome to the programme.
Good evening, Nigel.
You know Boris well, and I think you and I both agree on one thing. I mean, he does make some dreadful mistakes, but he is larger than life.
Yes.
Compared to the last two in this contest.
He is, and you've summed him up. He definitely will cast a huge